Expand was it? Shut up, actual app.
Okay. We'll talk on Wednesday about our groups and position paper. We might be looking at a test next Monday. It'll be before spring break. We'll see which way the wind blows over the next couple of days. We're moving into those decisions that we have to make when we're building a channel structure. Last week we talked about the big one, which is and then we basically said that general rule of thumb, you start from the concept of buy, in which you outsource everything unless you can come up with some justification, a significant one, to be willing to move to the make position. And of course, remember, please, the main reason is return on investment. Question, no doubt about it. And why you do this is you want to maximize your return on investment. This chapter deals with the three other questions that you have to ask when you're trying to make a channel system, and all of those are based on decisions that have to do beyond what merely cover. If I wanted to really cover a market, it's not that difficult to do, but I have to make sure that these three choices are made to maximize overall performance. And so, what are the three channel decisions that I want to do? The first is intent, which is how much coverage a supplier should have in its various forms. How intense. The next is channel types. And that is how many unique and different ways I will go to market, given the unique different channel environments that I have. Bricks, clicks, stores, kiosks, websites, any possible permutation that you can come up with. And then the last, which is a significant sales ticking people off, and that is dual distribution. And whether or not a supplier should directly to the end user as well. And so I go to market with my own channels, and I also go to market. Roy Hill has a factory store. I connected to the factory. Many other resellers. All you have to do is drive. Right? These are questions, and they Baker John, Baker buy, channel intensity, channel types, and whether or not to go to market myself. All right, so let's talk about these one at a time. And think about the reasons that you go in business and how they motivate the channel partners. And so, on one side, intensive distribution. Intensive distribution is the concept that a brand can be purchased from as many possible outlets in a given trade area. The intensive distribution is also the basic mindset of every manufacturer. If a manufacturer goes into business, their purpose is providing value, but also selling as many products as they possibly can in as many possible ways, as many possible outlets as possible. They want to sell product. QED. All right. Which means also that they will then reach, if they try this, a danger point, which is known as saturation. And that's also the end point over here. They want to sell in as many places as you could find a Coke. That would be an example. Exclusive is on the other side. And this is where you purchase through one vendor in the trading area, and in essence, it's a monopoly. This is the ideal place where every partner needs to be. A downstream retail outlet, exclusive all of the products that they sell because they trade and also maximize the profits. No decision is perfect, no easy. In fact, more intensely a manufacturer distributes their brand, the less the manufacturer influence how the channel members perform the functions. In situations where good is vitally important, not the success, use, safety of its. Your anybody ever bought use a chainsaw? How do you tend to grab? All right. Right. Don't. Yeah, but the first time one of those things and you go wah like that and that thing's spinning, you know, who knows how many revolutions. It's a scary feeling the very first time you do. Steel as a corporation, Steel Tools, Steel through an exclusive dealer network in what they basically have. They sell through Home Depot, not sell through Lowe's. Independent hardware dealers, they know can guarantee will back up their products with service. I mean,
Like Ace.
yeah. Well, yeah, Ace is the good one. But if you independent, usually those need Steve. Big. And but do seems well that's exclusive where they get the greatest amount of control. All right. So it's the manufacturers in their dealer network can demand that they have people trained from their main factory in Virginia. They know that individuals can get their local. It's not hard if you ever notice take care of lawns on the back of their trucks. Invariably, or quite a few of them have Steel Tools because guess what? They can go get them serviced and they can use them again. I had Mark strategy for a graduate class. I had someone in Hickory come in and bring in a chainsaw built in 1972. His grandfather had built it. That thing makes her back started class. Anyway, woke everyone up. The downstream members want to control everything. Want X. And the is they want to control the brand and to avoid price competition. Unfortunately, price competition happens two ways. One way bad, one way not. Intra-brand competition is when two dealerships, exact same product, the sellers of the same brand, sellers, okay, intra-brand. 4 or 5 outlets in a given retail trade area, they sell the same thing. Now, here's the difficulty with that. If it's the exact same product, 3 outlets, how is you as a consumer make a choice? Price, exactly. This is where service outlets are vitally important. This is where your service, this is where your spatial convenience, this is where all of those 6 major reasons why service outputs, these are why they're also important, because they can affect intra-brand competition. Because if I give better service than someone else, the better likelihood the consumer. Inter-brand competition is when there are many different brands in a given store of the same category. These particular brands is in competition with itself. And price competition is not as bad as this, especially if the products themselves are unique in some way. It's amazing to me, cell phones in a mature market as it is right now has so many unique permutations, even though all of squares are rectangles. I do think it's impressive. We found new ways to reinvent. So, and we do have multiple brands in this. So, upstream wants to sell as many as possible. Downstream wants to control as much of the market in the trade. Somewhere along this line, two are going to bump into each other. This is kind of an example where Coke has such enormous power that they want to be able to control an area. But, you know, me as a store, how do I stop selling Coke? It's not really possible. So how do I even just overcome losses if I have them the same way? Well, I really only have 3 possibilities. If it's closely substitutable, I might try to, come up with a substitute product and basically say this brand is just as good or better. Difficult, especially with loyal people. For me, there's nothing that beats Coke. I mean, Pepsi always wins the taste test, always does. And the reason why is that Pepsi is sweeter. Coke has one of its ingredients is black cherry. So for you Coke drinkers like myself, you want that bitter taste. The bitter taste is the reason to drink. It may not signal that without the bottle, but the bitterness is one of the reasons that you drink. So, they're not really substitutable in that way. All right. The other thing I might do is discontinue the entire product. I've had enough of it. There's no satisfactory substitute. I'll just say I've had this. Trying to convert people, you try to bring something in and hopefully get consumers to move to it, can sometimes be extremely difficult and it doesn't work. Consumers like what they want. So what generally happens is that you try to get consumers to buy other brands that have greater value to you, But the difficulty was this competition just may rule and I don't have a choice. Right? Now, this does lead to a couple of difficulties that happen in competitors. Both of them are difficult, especially when you're in a retail establishment and you're trying to sell. So, Rich, it is illegal, but you can still do it, but it perhaps might not be ethical. Now, when I was in my 20s and I worked in Lafayette, there's a company, by the way, in originally Texas, but we used to do this thing called bait and switch, not in its strictest sense, but we would do this to generate traffic. So how does it? So we would have once a week, it would be for a Saturday sale. We would have a price of something, Sony, television, radio, anything like that. And the price would come to the absolute above. Right? We would advertise this particular unit, and we'd have 12 or 15 in. So it wasn't really a true bait switch. We had product. Well, by the time the consumers came in, Saturday was always a big shopping day. Before noon, we have sold that item out. And then what you would do is you would say, well, here, anything else. So they came in the bait, and then you get them to buy another brand, the switch, in which the seller earns a higher profit. And so what stores will do is they'll earn brands. It's the reason why Walmart TCL TVs it would be like there would be on 75-inch televisions, and they may have had 3, and then they tell you to the TCL. But so you got a TCL, they phone, but they send upstream information. So you got to go into the settings. I was looking this up the other day. Got to go into settings and to beat that, take the click out, and that'll stop it from phoning home. Okay. The other is what's known as free riding. Both of these were issues of me in my 20s. I made a lot of mistakes in my 20s, and one of them was going on bait switch, even though it wasn't legal. It was. The other is free riding, and I'm the one who got hit because when I was, you're probably not surprised, but I like to hear myself. And so I would spend it's a big show. Live football game was phenomenal. Just don't have an idea. It's not surprising that in the 90s and 2000s, Fishy became the de facto standard for large outdoor advertising for electronics. Anyway, so you spend a lot of time teaching the consumer about the product. There's 2 in town that have the Mitsubishi new generation right and almost on the border of the city. And so after I schooled someone on why television's made, they go to do anything about it. Caused a lot of conflict. Eventually, they resolved it by getting rid of Mitsubishi. Boy, that really hurt my pocket because I sold a lot too. So these are the troubling factors that you have to deal with when you're talking about competition, especially downstream. Right. So here's an example of limited distribution, and it provides the best factor because what they did was they decided to, instead of selling their pet foods through, who knows, anywhere you want to think, PetSmarts or whatever, they actually sell through pet and garden stores in very particular narrow ways. And it ensures that high margins and fast growth, they hit all the right buttons, because for them it was a controlled burn or a controlled growth instead of churn and burn. So let's talk about distribution. Manufacturers want more outlets to carry their offerings. The problem is that downstream members lose the interest in pushing a supplier's offerings when quite simply all they're doing is training somebody to go online and buy it somewhere else. And so how do you balance this? How do you find some kind of reasonable middle there? Well, there's 4 options that you can have under your control. And these 4 are the contracts, pull strategy. We'll talk about these one at a time. RPM, resale price maintenance, and being selective, which makes the most sense. The first is contracts. You maintain and demand certain standards of conduct from your downstream members. Contractually, it is not simply about just selling the product, it's how you go about selling and what you're required to by yourselves in terms of capital improvements in order to sell. So go back to steel. Steel requires at least 1 full-time employee to be a trained technician. They require them to have gone to their steel school in Virginia. But it's an enormous advantage when you do that, just to have a trained personnel there. You know, the independent dealers who are willing to live with what steel demands of them get an enormous amount back. It is a very, very reasonable arrangement. The next is that you can reduce the tension on your downstream partners by creating a pull strategy. So we talked about pull as being when the manufacturer use correct. And so there's an intense campaign by the manufacturer to increase the brand equity. And so consumers are naturally pulled in to any location and buy anywhere. And that's a wonderful situation. But nothing is perfect. The difficulty with that is that it's extremely costly, and you get to where you're listening to your own things, you think you're the smartest thing on Wall Street. So then you think that your product, and then you start over, make too many. So Barbie is a classic example. Barbie been around 1958. Growth trend line. 90s, they kind of hit their stride. Time, and then Mattel tripped over itself and they created 450 model Barbie. In other words, expanded it by 5 times, and they reached a saturation point and really dropped both demand and value. So, really ticklish situation, especially for collectors, because Barbie dolls fall into what's called the collector stratus. So in other words, they are bought not just merely to be played, stored, and saved. And Barbie, unfortunately, reduced the value of a lot of people's collections. You get to gray markets, but there's a great documentary on a guy by the name, his nickname is Pez. So look it up, it's worth it. This guy, really interesting guy. He was a Pez collector, all right? Pez in the United States is a different organization than Pez in Europe. And he decided he wasn't going to be going through Pez United States. He went directly to the factory in Europe and started buying right back. You'll use a little grip, wet meat. But here's the key thing. This way, for any of you future entrepreneurs out there, I want you to remember this. Just because you have a trademark in the United States doesn't mean your trademark is recognized by customs. It requires separate a separate application for your trademark to be recognized as by customs in the United States. Because what this guy did was he came to the United States with all of his pets. Customs looked at it and said, "You can't bring this in here." They looked up their stuff and said, "Pets United States has no trademark on things outside the U.S." and they let him in. And it's just a fascinating story. It's taking an hour to watch. I'll talk about it. This is one of these. You do a full strategy. You think you're too smart for you. Retail price maintenance is where the manufacturer sets a price below which no channel members can sell the product. They set an absolute minimum. Well, the problem with that is that it can be sketchy, especially in terms of legality. And the answer is why? Remember the number functions. If I have physical possession and ownership, I'm a wholesaler. Physical possession and ownership. Real negotiation. So RPM has to be agreed with by all individuals in the system. Otherwise, it spins out of control. And the last one is that I'm selective. I can just think about the coverage I want to have, how large of an assortment I wish to have. And given those criteria, given the trade area, I decide how much I want to sell. Which means I go against my baser instincts and I decide I want to achieve maximum. I don't want to debase my own product by just simply turning out trillions. This is the most widely applicable of the four strategies. And this distribution selectivity, we're going to talk about that in just talk about some of the reasons why we're selective. Okay. All right. One of those listings. 8 factors for channel intensity. In other words, some of the big reasons why we're not selective or why we are selective. It is a pivot point. It is bidirectional. We can go either way. The first is we don't want anyone sitting around being complacent. All right. Want to avoid loss. A quasi-monopoly in distribution can encourage complacency. If I'm the only dealer in town, I'll get around to you when I got it to sell. A small member carry my product. Intra-brand competition is low. I've granted the members substantial power and they control the distribution. I wanted to be 2 or 3 connectors in every channel area. I want my channel partners to work every day at trying to drive my brand. And if they're the only game in town, absolutely a special. I always thought, Starbucks has neat niche. But I always thought Starbucks got in trouble last time because they were the only game in town. And I always thought Starbucks needed to come out with a different brand, a younger, edgier brand to appeal to you. And I think Starbucks would do great if it fought against itself. I really do, because I think competition would drive both of them, try to achieve better. It's just me. And you know, Starbucks was originally created. All right. And pretty much the model has remained the same. There's no model that's enormously successful. It get in the trouble. Yeah. So a little competition. So we could use a couple of now. Okay. Number one, the next one you've seen in every principal marketing book, and that has to do with product category. So way back in 1920, marketing split off determine more complete science. It came about the provisioning and efficient distribution of goods over chosen consumer segments. That directly comes from the definition. Okay, marketing was different than economics, and one of the things that they developed. What was this? McCarthy, no, it wasn't McCarthy. But they came up with three different convenience, not good, by the way, those that people don't know insurance. Tombstones. True story. My mother got wiped out by Katrina. 2006, she finally got a settlement, and my mother called. Grew up on the coast of Long Beach, and she goes, "Honey, I bought a plot for me in Long Beach, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, I'm my fun, Mom." And she said, "Oh, and I bought one for you, and I bought one for your brother, and I bought one for your sister." And my first thought was to go, "No, Mom." Then again, my mom took a lot of comfort in that, knowing, you know, a strange way. What could I say to my mother? And then, what do you? That's what I said. Okay, thanks. To recognize a certain product class, and that determines your distribution strategy. So convenience goods are FMCG, by the way, they'll hear this again. So if you know FMC, it means fast moving consumer. Okay. Remember, fast moving consumer, they're related to distribution. They have moved there quite readily. Staples, by the way, staples need those convenience goods are goods where you don't know where they are, need them in emergency. Umbrellas, rain suits, slickers, that would be the thing. Okay. So these goods are tied up around intensive distribution. Demand that you have other goods next to it, because shopping goods prompt comparisons of brands and prices, and because generally the capital expense of having multiple brands requires outlets to be of significant size, it means that stores usually have a decent selection in them. Shopping goods require shopping, whether it's done in an audience or whether it's done in person. But of course, as I've said before, we need to see the goods. Percent of all electronics are bought online, but 2/3 of those bought online, someone actually goes in the store and looks at, because the need to touch is present in all consumers. They need to eviscerate taste. Goods are selected for distribution, and because they're selected, it requires them to be in limited locations. Selective distribution means that the manufacturers must select and cultivate appropriate outlets in a given trade area. One of the reasons why is that the capital investment is significant. That's one reason. But generally, if you look at this in they also tend to be more complex. All right. They require an infrastructure for them to maintain. These aren't premium goods. We'll talk about premium goods in a minute. But just by the very nature, it's not like a store like that. And so if we take into account product category to drive our distribution by itself. To me, this is like the biggest decision. I mean, to sell something outside of its product category in the wrong location sets yourself up to make big mistakes. So, as I just talked about premium brand positioning, you want to signal the uniqueness and superbness. You need to be able to tell or show that your unique functions demand a unique place and justify the premium price. So all of the apples in here have 35 to 40% margin on them and are distributed to very select locations, universities and Apple stores. iPads, iPhones, and iPads are distributed through Walmart because they signal something different. But the iPads, through their selective distribution, or I should say premium distribution strategy, it creates this high quality position. And it also develops scarcity, because scarcity is valuable. There are enough diamonds in the world right now that diamonds could be reasonably priced. But one corporation in the world, Beers, controls the flow of diamonds in order to keep the price, up. Right? It's that kind of positioning that they're doing. Also, usually what you do is you have a very restrictive contract, or if you're like Apple, you in essence are vertically marketing control. Niche brand positioning is very similar to print, but very narrow, in a very narrow specialized industry. That mean is where if I were in computers is in a much better field. If you remember on last week when I showed you the USAN, that's a very narrow niche. They have a very narrow specialized groups of buyers. Their standards are in the thousands, so that usually speaks towards some kind of commercial. And so with that, the restriction is needed to maintain its high dependability. And so how do we position the brand can ultimately determine how many outlets. How much influence do we want to have? How much is important to us? If I spread my channels out in as many different possible ways, I reduce my overall influence because I don't have the resources to be able to demand every one of them to do a particular thing. I create a large army of indifferent channel members because, quite simply, if I'm using intensive distribution and everybody has my product, then nobody really cares to go out and push my product. But if I have only a handful of sources, I can offer greater rewards and gain more influence. And this is where Steel Tools, even though their dealer network is something like 15,000 in the United States and have exclusive distributors 10,000, 11 numbers. You would think with that many members that they could not have influence on it, but it's totally untrue. They create enormous reward power by working with them as a partner. Steel Tools will invest. If I build an extra place on my place of business, Steel Tools will contribute 30% to the capital needed to build. That is an amazing statistic. It is. And it's those kind of relationships that make Steel so powerful now. Even though they're not in home improvement, they're not in Lowe's, they're not in Home Depot, it doesn't matter to them. They know what their niche is and very successful. So influence. The fewer places, the greater the influence. Along with this, the ability to reward, there's also the willingness, dependence. Channel depend on each other. Mutual dependence is a stable relationship. It makes it unprofitable for either side to exploit each other. It gives them reasons to remain in the game. It is a successful arrangement when success depends on mutual cooperation. When we talk about of all of this dependence is vitally important because sometimes this thing keeps you going. It really difficult. As a rule of thumb, strong manufacturers refrain from maximizing cost. They want their channel partners to exploit the coverage. And the best success in the whole channel environment is when system by overall all the members achieve profits. The goal is always success. If one channel member is achieving maximizing profits by coercing another channel partner, it does not last forever. It's not a sustainable environment. Sustainability happens when all of the channel partners achieve success together. So, I have a trade area. Let's say it's Hickory. Hickory is kind of a unique area. I don't know. Hickory, yeah. Hickory is really special. There's a good reason why it's there. Hickory, major, smart. Malls, the stores, everything that they have in the area are a significant impact commercial. And so an area such as Hickory, we will give up the chance because the importance of that area and its competitive intent. I am in an intense category in this area, all right? I might not be earning great profits because of the level of competition, but because of its importance, I want to keep a skin in it because quite simply, it's profitable. It's all right. So anyway, you don't want to limit the number of brands. That area is. You hesitate to grant selectivity because of the competition. It's a win-win situation. Everybody has the potential to earn something. So the limitations are losing. The locations where I am. Area that's big, that enormous, that much places consumer electronics. You have at least 50 to 100 possible in here. So you want to be in the game. You don't want to be out. Flip to the other side. If you're in a very intense market, you can be incurring that are beyond your ability to maintain. Not there. So coverage, okay, the cost may be so great that instead of finding multiple individuals, you might find one master distributor to achieve everything that I want through a single partner. When LG developed the first real producer of electronics, it came out with high definition television in 2000. So they had achieved the product, everything that they needed to do, but they had not decided where to distribute their product from. So LG, looking at the landscape, decided that they were going to sell their high definition televisions exclusively. Well, and that meant that 4,500 stores in the United States, which they could sell them. It also meant that they could achieve all the economies of scale that they wanted. They're dealing with fewer entities, and it was vitally better for them economically. One of the things is, of course, they had to get rid of the factors of production, get their cost as quickly as possible. They did that for Walmart. And from 2006 to 2009, LG was the largest seller of consumer. So they achieved everything just by going to one resale. Right? So newer trading partners may lead to lower transaction costs. The opportunity cost may be far. It was a win situation. And not only that, but Walmart is better from that. Because Walmart started becoming a fairly decent consumer electronic place. And so Samsung now, Sony, all the other goods went ahead. And of course, TCS. And the last thing that you may want to do with manufacturer strategies is you may just want to build your brand. All right. If I can generate just brand is so powerful and overwhelming. Downstream partners are not worried about competition. I'm not worried about destructive tactics, which everybody's happy. So if I invest as a manufacturer, having the strongest brand I possibly can, I might solve all the problems. When Nintendo came out with the oh gosh, excuse me. We thank you very much. When they came out with Wii, it's an interesting story. They were 18 months away from bankruptcy. I read about that in Byte magazine, and they said that they had a new kinetic device, interactive device that was going to change the world. And one of the things about Wii is the brand was so overwhelmingly huge. It came out. It went 4 years running where they sold everything they made, and that's astonishing. And it's just because the brand was so strong and so powerful. Everyone wanted a piece of it, and they achieved just enormous success. It was the best. So these are all the reasons why, or how you consider channel intensity. All of these are logical answers when it comes to how many and how far. Okay. We'll stop there. We'll talk about channel types and we'll get up on Wednesday. Have a great day. Take care.
Done with